So while the whole Ukraine cinematic universe thing is largely a joke, it's dark humor, it's sarcasm, it's hyperbole, a lot of it is deadly serious. I do think that the leadership of the West and certainly the population has become so myopic and so solipsistic that they do actually think this is a Marvel movie at this point in time, in that they don't need strategy, they don't need tactics, they don't need logistics, they don't need industrial production. Ukraine's just going to somehow win, in that they've been telling Ukraine to conduct this war in a cinematic style. Like, if something's going to look cool, if it's going to make the front page, even if it leads to the deaths of thousands or tens of thousands of Ukrainian men in hopeless offensives or trying to hold territory that they really shouldn't be trying to hold, they've told them to just do it. And they have, like, oh, we have the new Iron Man suit in the form of the Leopards or the Patriot missiles or whatever. And the culmination of this entire thing, that we don't need strategy, we don't need tactics, we just need movie cliches, is this whole spring offensive. Now, I'm recording this in the middle of it, so maybe things will change, but all the evidence I've seen is that Ukraine's just getting slaughtered. They don't have air support, they don't have anti-air weapons, they have limited artillery. The Russians have minefields, they're behind defenses, they have artillery, they have helicopters, they have anti-tank crews. And you see Leopards getting blown up, you see Bradleys, MRAPs, all this other stuff getting destroyed, and none of this can be replaced. These aren't just, at this point, it's not just like old Soviet equipment or Leopard 1s or stuff like that they're sending. They sent the best Leopard tanks that they had. They sent the best Bradleys that they had. They sent the best Patriot missiles they had. And the U.S. can't replace any of this in a timely manner. So once all this stuff gets blown up and Russia's continuing to fire missiles and blow up ammo dumps, there's nothing left. I mean, the war may drag on for a couple more years, but Ukraine will have lost most of its potential to conduct offensives. It'll just kind of be a matter of time. As time goes on, Russia's getting stronger. It's ramping up its industry. The public remains united behind Putin. Western sources I've seen have Russia at a 10-1 artillery production advantage, and that's only going to and that's against America and Europe combined. And there's no way that the U.S. can ramp it up in any kind of time to really make much of a difference. And so after this fails, even if it succeeds and they retake territory, that's not going to change the fundamentals that Ukraine is going to burn through most of what's left of its modern equipment. And there's no way to get more. Like, the level of delusion that if you looked at foreign policy or the New York Times or the Washington Post, they were saying the Russians are just going to run away. It's going to be like Helm's Deep, where Gandalf shows up and the orcs just break ranks and flee. And that's what they thought was going to happen. And then they were just going to walk to Crimea and the Russian Federation was going to collapse. But that's not what happened, and that's not what's going to happen. And so the Western leadership is going to be left with the question of, what is it that we do when our movie reality collapses? When we realize that this isn't a Marvel movie, this isn't the Ukraine cinematic universe, this is war. And that we've sent tens of, or maybe even hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians and Russians to their deaths because we thought we were playing a video game. We thought we were playing Hearts of Iron 4 or something like that this was a Marvel movie, that the Avengers were going to somehow come up at the end. And they're going to be faced with a couple different decisions. And it's rough. It's rough because at this point in time, they're so invested in it. They've said so much stuff to their public. They've said this war is over multiple times. Ukraine's won 100%. It's done. They've hyped up the public to an impossible degree. They've told them this whole time that they're winning. And the first option is that they're going to have to is to back down. It is to say, look, we're just going to have to take whatever peace deal that we can get, even if Ukraine loses a bunch of territory, even if there's regime change, even if it can't join NATO. the longer this goes on, the worse the final settlement is going to be. And we can't keep throwing what's left of our weapon reserves into a hopeless conflict. So that's kind of option one. But like I said, I think these people are so delusional. It's not just the neocons, it's not just the whole democracy project. I think that their worldview is literally to see this as a movie, and it's literally like this schizophrenic view of it. And part of that is the media, part of that is their own hype, part of that is the Ukrainian government just lies to them about everything. Part of it is that they just like hate Russia, and they've hated Russia since the Cold War. And this is just kind of an extension of that. So I pray to God that they back down. I pray to God that they swallow their pride and they try to come to some kind of conclusion to this. And I will give Mr. Trump credit. He said, look, I don't really care who's right or wrong in this conflict. It just has to end because it's just people are dying every day, and it's terrible. And I just don't see how Ukraine can really win this. All it's doing is it's delaying the inevitable and making the eventual settlement just worse and worse and worse. And so that's option number one. They can back down. And I hope that happens. And I hope the sane people who are left can look at the numbers, can look at the industrial production, can look at the situation on the ground. And maybe like beyond just looking at that, go, is this really in our best interest? Like, is this really in Germany's best interest to destroy their economy, to deindustrialize, to bring back coal-fired plants, to do that? Is it worth the German foreign minister going to Brazil and saying the Brazilians are selfish pricks who only care about the price of bean and rice and they don't care about Ukraine? Is it worth alienating all your allies? And maybe some sane people will prevail. Maybe people will do that. I don't know. I still think that this is probably the most likely option. Maybe that's naive of me. But I do think there is a lot of inertia in the system and that things do kind of snap back to the reality. I think there's somehow they're going to find some way to declare victory, that they beat Russia. I saw someone saying, like, with regards to Leopard 2 being destroyed, this shows that Ukraine is winning by the fact that the Leopard 2 is being blown up. So that's option number one. Option number two is we have some kind of 24-hour GSOR op where Poland, the Baltic states, Romania, and friends is invited by Ukraine to enter the war, and they enter the war, but it doesn't trigger Article 9 because it's like America invading Iraq or Libya or Syria or whatever. It's not an attack on them, so it's not an attack on everybody. But we're going to have some kind of like lame combination where Poland will be in the war, but if Russia attacks Poland, then that's just beyond the pale, and that's going to trigger Article 9. And you'll just have the Polish army go in. You'll have Poland just, I mean, there's already mercenaries, there's already volunteers, but they're just going to go all in. My understanding is Poland has the third largest army in NATO now, after America and Turkey. That's at least what I've seen. They've been really trying to build Poland up as a counter to Russia. And then who knows, maybe Romania will, maybe a couple more countries will have colored revolutions, and then they'll join into this coalition of the willing. And that's the next phase, is just bringing all these people in and throwing the armies of various Eastern European countries into the meat grinder, while also having the US and the UK and France and Germany say, if you attack these countries that are attacking you, Russia, we're going to use nukes, or this is going to escalate to World War III. And I kind of think in that scenario, it's going to escalate into World War. Because what if they lose? What if the Polish army gets wiped out? What if the Romanian army gets wiped out? And the Russians go all the way to the border anyways? Is America going to accept that now that they've doubled down, now that they've tripled down? Are they just going to do like a direct intervention themselves? And that kind of brings us to option number 3. And we've started to see some hints of this. I still don't think this is going to happen, but we've seen hints where we have this Ukraine security guarantee. Ukraine can't join NATO. but we're going to issue a declaration of independence in the middle of a war, and if Russia doesn't stop, this will pull us into it. So I don't know if it would be a limited war, if it would just be America fighting Russia and Ukraine, if it would go beyond that. I don't even know, but I don't know really what's left at this point in time. Either you bring in like Poland and friends, or America just starts intervening directly. But it's that or back down, and I think the neocons will push for that. I think the neocons are so crazy and so ideological that they would prefer World War III. They would prefer a total war with Russia to giving up at this point in time. And I think a lot of the Western leadership, like I said, is so invested in this whole thing and thinks it's a Marvel movie and thinks that, like, if they give the big epic speech and all the guys wake out of their slumber and they come in and fight, that this is somehow going to be a fairy tale ending, that Russia's going to be crushed and they're going to save the. And like I said, I still don't think this is going to happen. I still think there's enough inertia. If nothing else, I don't think Biden will want to do this before the election. Although war presidents don't tend to lose. So who knows, maybe if he thinks he's going to lose to Trump, he'll start a war with Russia as a way of maintaining power for a second. I mean, once again, that sounds like crazy conspiracy theory stuff, but we're living in an insane world at the moment. We're living in a world where NATO's posting like stuff about Zelensky being Harry Potter, and Mark Hamill recording like Luke Skywalker air raid siren. Like, it's just nuts. So who knows? Maybe like America is so high on its own supply that they think Russia is just going to give up. That like the Russians have like this crap equipment, that they have poorly trained soldiers who are just like that. There's some third world second rate army, that they think that the Russian army, because they perform poorly at the beginning, for a variety of reasons. I think the main reason that the Russian army performs so poorly is they vastly underestimated the Ukrainians, the size of their army and their will to resist. I still think they thought it was going to be like what the Germans thought the Soviet Union was going to be, where they kick down the rotten door and the whole structure collapses. And the first couple like while was an embarrassment, but I think they have a much better idea of what's going on. And I think America thinks that it's going to be like fighting Iraq or like the Taliban or something. And that these aren't like, this isn't, I mean, Milley called them a superpower. He said there's three superpowers in the world: Russia, China, and America. That they're going to go to a war against a country that has thousands of tanks, that has a bigger arms industry, that has the best air defense systems in the world, that has drones, that has hypersonic missiles, that has glide bombs. I get that the US and everyone else also has them, but does have like all the same stuff, and often in greater quantities, especially since America and Europe have thrown so much of its core equipment that they can't replace in a timely manner. So I'm not going to meme, I'm not going to LARP, I'm not going to say that, oh, Russia is going to overrun Europe, they're going to retake Poland, they're going to impose a world order. It's going to be like how it would have gone with the Soviet Union in 1970. But I don't think the results are going to go the way America is expecting it to go. I don't think it's going to be like Desert Storm, where you have like 3 Abrams taking out 60 Russian tanks. I think the Russians are going to fire back. And even though I do think the American equipment is still probably better, as I've said, Russia is the Costco of armies. They produce equipment that's very cost effective for what it is. Their tanks and stuff may be like a 7 out of 10, but it's better to have like 5, 7 out of 10 tanks than 2, 9 out of 10. Which is, I think, generally speaking, their logic is, so even if the US gets a positive kill ratio, I just don't know. I mean, they're out of artillery shells. They had to borrow like 500,000 of them from South Korea and some bizarre arms swap, so they could maintain their stocks while sending their stocks to Ukraine. So I don't think it's gonna. I think it's gonna be a disaster. I don't think America's necessarily gonna like lose horribly or anything, but it's not gonna be like a SEAL club. It's gonna be going up against another modern army who has who's gonna start shooting down their expensive jets, who's gonna blow up their ammo depots with super hypersonic missiles. I mean, the Patriot couldn't stop their like missiles. So I mean, if it's their best equipment and it's sucking and it's not working, why do they think it's gonna suddenly? I mean, I guess there's much better training and part of this problem. Like the logistical issues of having 50 different weapon systems would not occur if America was doing. The poor training would not be an issue. But I just can't see it going from like somehow the F-35s come in and the Russians can't shoot them down and they just blow through everything. My point is that if America does escalate this, it's going to be a full-on war. And then, as always, this brings up the question of nuclear weapons. Now, I don't think nuclear weapons are going to be used. I really, really doubt that. I don't think either side is going to use them. I think Russia is going to threaten to use them probably more. But I ultimately don't think even the neocons are crazy enough to. Well, no, I do think they're crazy enough. But I think like everyone else around them is not crazy enough to use nuclear weapons in Iran. And sorry, not Iran. Well, maybe in Iran. That's what McCain wanted. But use nuclear weapons in Ukraine and try to use that if there's no other way to win the war. Because Russia has nuclear weapons too. I still think we have enough rational. It's not going to come to that. That it's not going to come down to a total war. I don't. Even though I think it's extremely unlikely, I don't think a direct U.S. intervention is completely off the table. Even if they, or at least something where they do it in some roundabout way where they're sort of at war but sort of not at war, and like half the U.S. Army is like volunteers now, or something like that. I do think there is a real possibility of that happening now. I would have said a year ago there was a 0% chance. Maybe there's like a 1 or 2 or 5% chance of that happening. Maybe there's a 10% chance that Poland and friends enter the war. And maybe it's still an 80 or 90% chance that they do de-escalate this. Try to figure out some way to spin this as a victory and go home. But the fact that we're even starting to think about these things as being a possibility is really disturbing. And the fact that our leadership are neocons and people who think that this is a fucking cinematic universe of Marvel movies is also disturbing. Because these people don't live in the same world that we do. That like they don't live in reality. They live in the world of the 24-hour media cycle. They live in the world of like where this is a Hearts of Iron 4 game. This is like some, I don't know, docu-special on the History Channel. These aren't real people. Ukraine's not, like the Ukrainians aren't people. The Russians aren't people. It's just a big game where they're hitting the influence button and they're hitting the like coup button or the destabilization button in a civilization game. Or Europa Universalis 4. So maybe these people are delusional enough to think that it's going to be that they can hit the declare limited war button or something and they can somehow turn this whole thing around. And that Russia is like how they're represented in like 1980s and 1970s action movies. And just everybody in the Russian army is a complete retard that can't shoot a gun straight. Like some Arnold Schwarzenegger movie. I don't know, but I'm just saying, part of me is worried. Like, once again, I'm not going to be like a doom monger or do fear porn or say, oh, 100% this is going to be World War III. China's going to get involved. There's going to be nukes flying everywhere. I don't think that that's likely. I think that's extremely unlikely. But the fact that I'm even entertaining that possibility is fucking scary. And the fact that we can't trust our leadership to immediately say, you know what, that's a bad idea. We aren't going to go there is also really scary. The fact that I can see a lot of them going, we'd rather escalate than try to negotiate an end and we've backed ourselves into a corner, and we're so prideful, we're so delusional that we're willing to just keep plugging along, to keep just doing whatever it takes. It's something that scares the shit out of me and should scare all of you. So that's my video. I don't know where we're going to go from here. Maybe the offensive will have more luck than I think it will. Maybe this whole thing will be turned around and Ukraine will win, or the US will ramp up its production. I don't think so. And like I said, for this whole video, I didn't talk about ideology really at all, or who I would prefer to win the war or anything like that. Everything I've seen from the basic industrial outputs of the respective, to how like the satellite photos of Russian defenses, to the fact that the aid bills that are put out by the U.S. Congress are mostly stuff that is like IOUs. I just don't think that stuff is really arguable. I don't think that is just Russian propaganda. I mean, it's like Western sources are saying that they're producing a tenth of the number of artillery shells. So those are my thoughts on the matter. I won't say I hope you enjoyed the video, but I hope you found it interesting. God bless everybody. We're in for a wild ride, regardless of what happens.